The Focal Utopia is Focal's flagship open-back headphone. Focal originally released the Utopia in 2016, with newer editions that came out in 2020 and 2022. The new Utopia has some apparent aesthetic changes from the previous Utopias, notably the inclusion of the Focal logo on the external honeycomb grille. The cable inputs are now built into the housing rather than protruding from it as they did on the other versions of the Utopia. Last thing I'll mention here for its physical design is the new inclusion of forged carbon yokes. The Utopia 2022 has seen some technical upgrades as well. The formless voice coil in its 40mm beryllium dynamic driver is now composed of 30% copper and 70% aluminum. This gives it a lighter weight and increases its durability and longevity. Another upgrade is the now M-shaped speaker driver grille, originally designed for the Focal Clear MG, which follows the curve of the driver's M-shaped dome. According to Focal, this results in better treble reproduction and linearity. The last thing I want to note here is that the Utopia has a modest 80 ohm impedance, making it pretty easy to drive. The Utopia 2022 comes in a luxurious leather-bound box. Inside, we have the Utopia itself, a firm carrying case, a cable with a 2-pin connection and an 1/8-inch unbalanced jack and 1/4-inch adapter, a balanced cable with a 4-pin XLR jack, and some user manuals. As far as how it looks, I've seen people say that it looks a little sportier than the 2020 edition and the original edition. And I would agree with that in the sense that a sports car is sporty, not like a literal sporty look. It has this Focal logo now on the side. Still looks very serious. I would say that, that's something it has in common with the other two editions. A very serious professional look. But it's a little snazzier now, I would say, with the inclusion of the logo on the side. Also, to my eyes, at least, it seems like something about the red on it seems a little more prominent now. Now, as far as fit goes, if you've tried a Focal headphone on your head before, you probably have a pretty good idea of what these feel like. It feels a lot like the Celesti. It feels a lot like the Clears. Feels a lot like the Stelia. It has the same sort of very widely placed headband, and then also has the same sort of like spring-loaded cans that calibrate to the angle on your head. I would say that the fit is maybe a little firm on the sides, but not too firm by any means, and that's something that I have a hard time imagining anybody saying that they find uncomfortable. I don't think too many people are going to be saying that it's like too tight on their head. I don't know, unless you like broke your jaw or something recently. I think that some of the pressure you'll feel down here, but I mostly think that that's a non-issue, and if anything, it just makes it feel secure on your head. These are the same weight as the Focal 2020, and that would be 490 grams. And you feel most of that weight on the top part of your head. So yeah, I would say that up here, like right here, right at the top is where you feel most of that weight. But down here, it feels really nice. Like I said, it's a little firm, but it's not too firm. And also these pads have a really nice density to them, really cushiony, lightweight feel. Also, these pads are porous and I think just extremely comfortable. Also, I think that they have some great acoustic properties, which I'll get into shortly. Fit-wise, it might be a bit heavy, which isn't unusual for, extremely high-end headphones, but it's really, really comfortable. You're going to feel most of the weight on the top of your head. And then also worth noting is this headband that it has on it is genuine leather, which is pretty nice and actually surprisingly unusual to see. Most headphones use synthetic leather. So you're getting what you paid for. And then also these yokes now on the side are carbon, which even though this weighs the same as the 2020 model, Focal says that something about the nature of these carbon yokes just helps distribute the weight a bit better on your head. Ultimately, I think it's right in line with the rest of the brand. It feels like wearing pretty much any other Focal headphone, barring a few outliers. And that being said, I think Focals have a great fit, so I really like the way that these feel. Now, to get into how these sound, I will start by saying that I've heard Focal describe these as a pair of loudspeakers for your head. And I think that is actually a pretty good description, especially of their soundstage. You might be expecting me to say, full 360, felt it all around me, felt parts flying over my shoulder. I actually didn't really get that from these. I think that these do actually represent like a near field monitor listening experience pretty well. And in that sense, it's a very forward-facing stage. It is a very similar sort of spatial experience that you would get out of listening to a set of near-field monitors. So as far as width goes, it's a pretty sizable width, but I think that what impressed me the most with the spatial features that it has to offer is the height. I got really strong senses of height out of these, and I feel like that's where you're going to feel most of the spatial separation. Now, when it comes to like the timbre and the tone of these, it's actually a little difficult to talk about at length what exactly the 2022 sounds like, because more than anything else, it is through and through and through a very, very natural sounding balance. So that being said, I'm going to talk about parts of the balance that really stood out to me that I think indicate some of the really premium qualities that it has to offer, besides it just being one of the most natural balances that you can get out of a headphone. So starting with the pads, actually, something that I really, really liked about these lambskin pads and the memory foam density inside of them, they picked up vibration in a really fun way. And I'm not just talking about rumble that you hear in like the sub bass or the bass. I was feeling mids vibrations through the pads as well. So it gives a really nice, tactile sensation when you're listening. Speaking of rumble, to talk about the low end for a little bit, subs are slightly attenuated on it, and that's not really surprising. I feel like most headphones that are going for a really clear, balanced, natural sound, you have a little bit of sub bass attenuation to avoid, issues with masking. And then I would say it puts more of its stock into its mid bass. And overall, the bass sounds really tight, well controlled, and punchy more than anything. But that low end continues into the mids profile. And I think that what's interesting about the Utopia is that it has pretty prominent low mids in a way that retains a crazy amount of detail. So it does have a warmer sound signature in that regard. Even though it's very, very balanced, there is like a low mids presence to it that I think is particularly more noticeable in the 2022 than it is in the 2020. A lot of the times I think that lower mids are brought up in a balance to add like a general sensation of like warmth and pleasantness. I mean, if you ask me, I'm usually very, very critical of balances that are leaning into their low mids. But that being said, I feel like the Utopia, yes, there's some degree of boost in those low mids, but really more than anything, I think it's revealing low mid detail more than it is ramping up volume. So it has that warmth, but in a way that I think never ever runs the risk of any sort of muddiness, anything like that. It's maybe the one time that I can recall saying that the low mid detail was outstanding. So even though there is that low mid presence that's noticeable with these, it puts more emphasis into the high mids, and it starts doing that pretty early on. It starts ramping up from 1,000 to 2,000 kilohertz, and then by the time it's in its low treble, it's pretty thoroughly boosted. If you look at the frequency response for this, it doesn't, it's not the closest to a Harman curve by any means, but I would say that the peaks on it, the peaks that you'll see in its high end on its frequency response, are touching the Harman curve target. So it has those elevated high mids that lead into, much more obviously elevated mid treble. The extension is the cherry on top, I think. It's staying pretty pleasantly balanced from 10 to 20, where it's not rolling those off. It's definitely exposing a lot of high-end detail, but not at all in a shrill sort of way. I would say that people are right when they say that it seems to have a little less aggressive treble than the 2020 edition, and I think that that is part of what plays into its warmer character. The low mids are brought up a little bit, and then the low and the mid treble, I think, are brought down just a little bit, but still has a really great extension, as you would expect from, an audiophile grade, super high-end premium headphone like the Utopia 2022. And then there's the question, is this actually, a $5,000 headphone? And I don't know if there's a fair way to answer that question. Once you start getting into this price range, it's kind of hard to say, well, actually, I think it's worth $4,000 instead of $5,000, or actually, this is worth $6,000 and it's a steal at $5,000. I'll leave it at this. If you want to get the absolute best dynamic driver open back headphone, you found it. It's the Utopia. And if it's not the 2022, it's the 2020, depending on who you ask. So obviously, when you're getting to this price range and you're legitimately shopping for something like the Utopia, it's unlikely that money is really the issue for you. Maybe you've saved up enough to get the endgame headphone. And if there's anything that really qualifies as an endgame headphone where you're not sure if you're ever going to find something quite as good as it, I think the Utopia, it's pretty fair to say that it falls into that camp. It's just incredibly revealing, and it's very sophisticated. I would say that near field speaker experience, it's something where it almost feels like the proper way to listen to audio. I'm kind of unsure of how else to describe it, but to recap, I would say overall, the soundstage can accurately be described as a near-field monitor sort of listening experience. It's very forward-facing, it's fairly wide, and it's also surprisingly tall. It has a good deal of height going on in it. When it comes to balance, it's not the strongest sub-response, but that's not really something that a headphone about this is all about. It very slightly rolls off those subs just a little bit, and then puts more energy into the mid bass, has this really nice, tight, punchy, very well-controlled mid bass. Then when it comes to mids, it's a little warm in the sense that, the low mids are brought up a little bit. What really impresses me with it, though, is the detail that's contained within that warmth, that low mid detail. It's a sort of timbre that headphones in general, even really high-end ones, I think struggle to get detail out of, and that's something that the Utopia really excels at. I would say, ruler flat center mids, which make vocals sound hyper realistic. And then high mids start ramping up, and that leads into, a fairly boosted, low treble and mid treble, with high treble staying, pretty close to a baseline level. It's not rolled off heavily, but it extends with a good amount of satisfaction without bringing, shrillness into the picture or anything like that. I would say that for a $5,000 headphone, you are getting what you paid for. Comes with a beautiful case. The headphone itself has a lot of premium materials that go into it that, more than just looking pretty, actually will ensure a pretty long shelf life, especially with the changes that were made to the voice coil. as well as these carbon yokes that seem more sturdy now. These pads on it are not just really nice from like the acoustic vibration standpoint, but are also just really comfortable. You know, has a pretty pro look to it, also has a kind of sporty look to it. And then most importantly, more than anything else, it is truly the embodiment of high fidelity. And, you know, high fidelity, that gets thrown around a lot. And sometimes people just mean, oh, it sounds amazing. But I mean fidelity in that true sense of the word, of like a super honest sound character where everything sounds really, really balanced and sounds like the way that music is supposed to sound. And that's kind of what I was getting at when I was saying that near field speaker experience, that sort of near field soundstage, something about it just feels right. Like that is the proper way to listen to music. So thank you for watching. I'm including a promo code below that will get you 10% off at the Audio 46 store if you apply it at checkout. Also including a link to the Focal Utopia 2022 from the Audio 46 store down below as well. And if you want to see more videos and reviews like this, remember to like and subscribe. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.